SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to today's lecture. So far we have discussed about the process of mineral inventory estimation. We made a short journey through the mineral exploration architecture, different stages of mineral exploration, discovery of a ore deposit, identification of the ore body, in then understanding the three-dimensional geometry of the ore body, and then estimating its quality quantity parameters, and then the stage that possibly is reached where the ore body as a mineral commodity, as we have in our course of discussion we have pointed out and many times, that it is an economic commodity. It will be used for it is to be exploited for economic growth, for economic purposes, as a as a raw material to industry, to be sold in the market at a price, and for the sustenance of that particular industry, a mine, for earning the revenue for a particular period of time which will be feasible. So, there will be lots of different types of studies which are carried out exactly before that the ore body is actually made ready and the exploitation process starts. So, from the discussion that we had so far, now we will be getting into the area in which we can broadly put under the category or under the broad subject head as mineral economics, because mineral economics as a it's an independent branch, and it has got so many facets, so many different aspects, different components. It's not possible, or it's not easy to just cover within this short lecture series where we have designated only for about this 4 or 5 lectures to discuss this. So, in this I will restrict myself to very important certain salient aspects of mineral economics, which as a geologist, every geologist should have those knowledge, because those are after all their resources, they are available in the earth's crust, they are product of complex geological processes, and a geologist definitely understands them better than anybody else. But the fact that they are economic commodities, certain economic aspects also have to be understood about them, and so I will just try to touch upon some of the aspects like this. I would like to make you recapitulate about certain aspects of the mineral resources. So, the most important part of the mineral resources are that they are non-renewable. So, that is the reason why the branch of economics is also labeled as economics of non-renewable resources, and mineral resources is definitely possibly the only one which is a non-renewable resource. And as we know that the rate at which we produce and consume the mineral resources, these metals and the materials that we recover, a far faster rate by which these deposits actually form in the earth's crust. We have some idea, because we have seen them forming in the ocean floor and the mid oceanic ridges and the present day ore forming systems, but then the quantity in which they accumulate, the rate at which they accumulate is far slower than the rate at which we have been exploiting and utilizing these resources. So, they are non-renewable. So, there is always a question of sustainability and the way we utilize them. There should be optimal ways of utilizing them, and for their so that this resource lasts for the future, even though we always put a question mark as to how. So, therefore, any ore body, when we discover them, it is present in finite quantity, that we have seen how we can determine the quantity, although in many of the situations the determination of quantity keeps on getting revised, which is definitely more of an issue with the estimation procedure, but we must be reminded of the fact that there any particular occurrence where the ore body is occurring, the quantity is finite. We always calculate in terms of if a particular ore is produced at such and such tons or thousands of tons per year, how many years that particular mine will last, and it sometimes so happens that the initial estimate might vary marginally or sometimes significantly with the progress of the mining activity, but the fact remains that they are finite quantity. They are transcendental in nature, means they do not abide by geographical boundaries. The examples also we have discussed before. There are uncertainties about their quality and quantity, which is very specific, because any other resource, earth resource that we talk about, their quality and quantity are well determined. There is very little of uncertainty that is involved in their estimation, whereas mineral resources, because they do occur in the subsurface, and the subsurface extension has to be understood properly, and many a times it remains uncertain, and that is one of the major important issue about the mineral resources. They are results of their products of results of complex natural art processes, which we have all seen through, and they occur in the subsurface. Rest all earth resources occur on surface. Of course, water resources also occur in subsurface, and that is a independent topic by itself. And as we have not included water in our discussion in this particular lecture series, we will not discuss on that any further. But other than these two, all other resources that we exploit or come in use of our economic development, they all occur on surface, whereas these mineral resources, primarily they occur in the subsurface. There are locational and distributional peculiarities. They occur in very inaccessible parts, and only when we discover them, then only we build up the infrastructure for their exploitation. But then the fact remains that there are locational and distributional peculiarities. There are uncertainty about usability, which we have discussed. Perpetuality, there is only with because once an ore body has formed in any segment in the crust, it remains, it does not get destroyed, other than the fact that there are Earth's own cannibalistic recycling process by which mineral deposits get destroyed. And we, in the beginning of our introductory part of the lecture series, we talked about the half life period, etc., but they are all in terms of millions or billions of years, which is different from the kind of perpetuality that we are talking about here. Now, one of the very important aspect of mineral resources and why it stands as very different from the other resources is that it involves very high investment risk, because as we have seen in the whole process of mineral exploration is a high risk economic activity, and it involves and the success rate, why it becomes the risk comes in because the rate of success of mineral exploration is actually very low, and that is the reason why there are very involved risk analysis in the present day. It uses all sorts of complicated or elaborate exercise, mathematical models for doing this risk analysis, and whether a particular mineral project would be worth taking up. And in the history of mineral exploration, as we discussed before, there are many exploration activities which gets abandoned at different stages and again resumed, and again all on such kind of economic grounds. And the relationship between minerals and economy, which is a very intricate issue, as how mineral resources will be effectively utilized for the development of any economy of any country. There are case studies in which there are many countries which have been able to effectively utilize their mineral resources and in improving their economy, as well as there are instances in which the particular country which is endowed with such mineral resources have not been able to utilize or not been able to make such economic growths out of their mineral riches, and these are the things which make so the relationship between minerals and economy has to be very well established, very well I mean the relationship has to be very well established for actually getting the benefit of the mineral resources. So, now this subject of mineral economics can be, there could be many possible views on this. The subject of mineral economics can be broadly looked at into two broad components. One, I could say it is microeconomic, like we have microeconomics, and macro. So, the micro is always will be the individual property of the mine, or what essentially the economists say as farm economics. So, these are some of the points which possibly come into our mind while discussing about the microeconomic aspects of mineral deposits, mineral resources. So, first of all, that we have the evaluation in terms of actual tons of metals or minerals present. This is a very elaborate exercise. It not only an elaborate exercise, but this exercise has to be carried out all throughout the life cycle of a mine for revision of reserve, for refinement of the ore body geometry, as we saw before, and so this remains a very important economic activity which goes on even after the discovery of the particular deposit or even the project is taken up. The costing of pit head price of unit ore, which we have seen, it depends on lot many parameters. What exactly is the price, that means the total amount of investment that has been made in terms of the machineries, manpower, all capital investment, development of the mine. We can always think of that what is the price of a unit mass of the ore when it is just pit is for the mine, which which may be a surface mine, which is called a pit, and pit head means when the ore is has not been transported anywhere, but the price could be fixed as to what could be the pit head price, and many of the commodities are reported in day to day reporting media, that what is the pit head price. Mine life is an important thing that is determined, as I said before, based on the total quantity of the metal and the type of mining that is planned and the initial planning on what will be the rate at which the mineral or the ore body will be exploited. Based on that, a mine life is calculated, and if within that mine life the revenue that is to be earned by this process of exploitation will make the project feasible in the long run, then only the mining is taken up. Calculation of all cost factors and the net profit. This also is a very high economic, very involved economic exercise. Maybe we will be able to see a couple of them. Mineral economic parameters such as cash flow, net present value, and internal rate of return. So, these are certain very key economic parameters such as cash flow, net present value, and internal rate of return. We will explain, we will see what they are in the subsequent class lectures. And reinvestment in future exploration and augmentation of reserve. This is a situation in which that when an ore body has started to produce the ore is being either sold directly or being processed, and some finished product like a concentrate or in terms of the metal that is recovered by process of smelting, etc. If it is being taken up by the same agency, for example, the mining right at this point of time, the mining of copper and its beneficiation in producing the copper concentrate, and also the smelting is done by a single agency. Let us say that is the Hindustan Copper Limited which does it. So, this the revenue that is earned in this process also has to be reinvested for further exploration and augmentation of reserve, because if there is no further exploration activity carried out once the mine has started to produce, then the mine cannot proceed on, this mine life cannot be extended, and in the long run what will happen is many of the ores will remain unexplored or will remain hidden within the within that particular segment of the crust, never to be found again. So, for exploration in continuation or going along with the mining activity is a very common activity, very important activity that any of the particular mining agency has to take up. So, these are all these, and there could possibly be some more, but these are some of the important aspects of the microeconomics of the which is related to an individual property, that is a mine. Now, what exactly the macroeconomic parameter means? Macro means always at a national or a global context. The supply demand is definitely controlled both internally and externally. Whenever there are any of the commodities that a particular country is endowed with and is deciding to export and earn revenue from that, so that definitely will be affected by the global demand for that particular metal. The recent cases of the iron ore, which we have seen, sometimes there is a boom when there is a large demand in the international market, and sometimes there are slumps if the demand falls. We may possibly be able to see a little bit about that. Then sustainability, it is also for in a global context, that how much we always ask ourselves that how much of resources we are left with, and this question has to be, we sometimes need an answer to this question, even though many a times we do not get a very satisfying answer on that, because of the fact that if we take the whole world as a to the countries like the developed countries, the developing countries or the underdeveloped countries, the per capita consumption of different commodities, metals or the materials that we see, there is a wide disparity in the rate at which, for example, developed countries like the United States, Canada or United Kingdom or Japan, Germany, some of the developed European countries, there the per capita demand and the consumption of these metals are several orders of magnitude more than the per capita consumption and demand of those particular material in the underdeveloped part of the world. We know where are they, and this price is also controlled by several economic activities. There are international trade, and there are different types of policies, stockpiling policies. There are cartels that actually control the price, international trade and cartels, which I have already mentioned. For example, even though we have not discussed, but one of the very good example of an international cartel is the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, which is OPEC, and we know that that particular body is responsible or regulates or controls the price of the crude oil, which is sold internationally as we know in terms of in quantities of barrels. So, these are some of the things which are the macroeconomic parameters, where all the mineral producing countries have to be a part of it. Like global mineral policies, for example, we have the seabed, the seafloor, which also bears mineralization of many of the important metals. One or two examples which I have seen before, like the ferromanganese nodules, which are rich sources of metals like cobalt and nickel, and they are all scattered in different geographical region in the seafloor. So, these resources, they do not belong to any particular country, they are the resources which belong to the whole world, belong to the entire human population. And then definitely there would be some policies, international policies, regulation that will be required for exploitation of such kind of resources which do not belong to any particular nation. And then individually coming to any particular country which is a mineral producing country, there also a national mineral policy is required for its sustainable exploitation, having properly formulated policy so that the best economic benefit is obtained from the mineral resources of that particular country. And mineral policy versus vis-a-vis economic policies, for example, the mineral policy has to be a part of the economic policy, which is the policy of the country, which will be so the mineral policy has to abide by or have to be within the framework of the national mineral policy. Mineral deposits and economic growth of nations, and for example the timing of exploitation of mineral deposits, and importantly the national mineral policy also, as we will be seeing them in our course of discussion, that is also very important in terms of formulation of policies of the economic rent that is coming out of the particular mineral resource exploitation. So, the mineral deposit, the way their contribution to the economic growth of any particular country, there are certain very key factors, key points. For example, one would always ask whether the mineral deposits should be exploited as and when they are discovered, because we talk of an issue called sustainability. Is it that if we should observe some restraints of exploitation of the mineral deposits? For example, whenever we are discovering an ore body, whether it would be wise to immediately start exploiting the ore body, or would defer that particular exploitation for a future time, so that that particular ore remains unutilized and it possibly can be left for future generations to get the benefit out of it, and possibly some idea would go in that direction. We will also be looking at it one or 2 points closely. Then also something which is related to sustainability is recycling, that we have almost more than 2 centuries of very active, because mineral exploitation can possibly go to even far back in history to the Bronze Age, Copper Age or Iron Age, so on. But we can say that it's the active exploitation of different mineral resources, the technology of extraction of the different metals, use in the different industry, that is possibly has been much happening at a much more enhanced rate, and also at an exponentially enhanced rate for at least past 1.5 centuries, or if not more than that. So, within that period we have been using these metals in various industries and various purposes. For example, for our motor vehicles, for any kind of electronic goods, or infrastructure, steel infrastructure, and so many things, construction and so many things, we have been utilizing these metals. These metals definitely after a certain period of their use, they will get degraded and they are discarded. So, in that case, is it possible that thinking of a future point in future, that the resources have dwindled and the total available quantities of resources that were there, because we have been constantly exploiting them, and as I have just said that the rest of the world, or the developing world or the underdeveloped world, where the demand and the per capita consumption of these particular metals are also increasing, then if the entire world population starts to use metal or demand or require the metal or materials in the same rate at which the developed countries are doing now, then there is going to be a very fast depletion of the resources, provided the technology develops to an extent that demand might possibly be substituted by some very future kind of materials which will be possibly be helpful in bringing such kind of situations to a sustainability for a still longer duration of time. The other hand, it might be that we may have to depend more on reusing or recycling of the materials or the metals that we have been discarding through the past history of our utilization or exploitation of these materials. That would be an interesting thing to see, and this also is a part which will be taken up as a macroeconomic issues. So, out of these that we have listed, there are some important issues which we will discuss, and as I have said that all these issues cannot be discussed in all the great details, because there are round the clock analysis using methods of econometric time series for trying to understand the trends in which the mineral resources are exploited, their price, fluctuation of their price, and their rate of consumption, the demand. So, they are constantly being monitored and being analyzed by active group who do that, and so it is not possible to although it would be very interesting, and as I have said that it would always be good that as geologists we do have a good understanding, and also to not only just to understand, but also to contribute to this particular subject of mineral economics. So, we will start maybe just make a beginning of the discussion of this mineral economics, starting with the farm or the microeconomics. So, I will just make an introduction to this concept. We are talking about so here actually the in the context of a particular mine project, we can be thought of as particularly we could possibly evaluate a project. So, this project evaluation is essentially targeted towards getting a final answer that whether a particular ore body will be subjected to a mining activity or not. So, it first starts with the conceptual studies, as has been mentioned here, it is taken from this particular source. The conceptual study, and each step, as I in our microeconomic aspects of mineral economics, we always come across this particular term as NPV, which is the net present value, and which we will be discussing later. This net present value has to be positive. A net present value can be just explained in this way, that if I value a particular property and that particular value to be to hold good for a particular point of time, then what is the value that possibly has to be invested right at this point of time to get that value in future, and that possibly some kind of a quantity which will be called as a net present value. So, the conceptual studies first is carried out, and then a net present value is computed. If the net present value is positive, then we go for an order of magnitude study. So, this so if it is negative, then we say that the resource is not definable, means the resource is discarded, keeping in mind that there is always a scope for revisit or relook at the process, that the method that we have adopted for calculation of that NPV, and whether, but if we just take it as a one particular flow of the processes, then the order of magnitude study, where we do the data collection, validation, interpretation, modeling and resource estimation, and then try to find out what is the net present value on that. So, if it becomes negative, then it is project is discarded. If it is positive, then we do some pre-feasibility studies, that is the pre-feasibility studies are essentially drilling and other data collection, validation, interpretation, modeling and resource estimation, and which is done after we do our conceptual study and the order of magnitude study. And then again the net present value, if it comes to be positive, then if it is negative, we discard that project. If it is positive, then we go for the further feasibility study. In this stage of feasibility study, it is definitely very crucial. We are doing the infill resource and geotechnical drilling, modeling and resource estimation, and here also in this kind of situation we always take into consideration the geological aspect of the ore body, its detailed mineralogical aspect, and then whether the process that will be required to extract the metals or to do the beneficiation for the particular ore, in which we also discussed about what many fundamental type of studies, like even studying the mineralogy of the ore body, the texture and the kind of process that will be required to extract the material from the ore body is also very important. And after all these calculations of these studies, if it still the results of these studies coming out to be positive, then it also again ends up in a net positive net present value, and then we go for a detailed engineering and the ore reserve estimation. And all these situations, it might so happen that the data has to be sufficient. If the data is insufficient, then we again go for collection of the data, that essential data that is to be required. So all these three stages that we have shown here, before discarding or before coming on to the conclusion that whether it is yielding a net positive net present value, we can always reassess the situation by asking ourselves that whether the decision has been made on adequate data. If not, then again acquire the data that is necessary for that and go ahead with this analysis. So this is a very simple presentation of a flow chart, which is followed in the beginning of discovery of the particular area to be potentially ore bearing, and then going on in different stages of study till the time that we come out with a positive result, that the net present value is positive, and then the detail of the engineering and the ore reserve calculation and further economic exploitation of the ore body is planned. So we will continue discussing the other microeconomic parameters in the coming lectures. Thank you very much.